Thank you all for being here tonight. This event demonstrates the irony of the world of publishing. It's actually, Bruce should be introducing me. But that's the way things go. But back in the day when I was a kid, and this was before television, there was only radio programs, radio serials, and the occasional movie serial. And so in order to get a decent role model, I had to rely on something I got in grammar school. It was called the Weekly Reader. And many of you may remember it. It's still being put out by Scholastic. But my first true role model was Admiral Byrd. Here was a guy who went places, discovered things, looked for things. There was no end to his adventures. Okay, that's a great way to start building up a list of role models. And interestingly enough, the way it works out, tonight's speaker had a role model, a guy by the name of Ernest Shackelford. Maybe that name rings a bell. At any rate, it motivated him to get to the lower polar region. And by the way, one of the first things you'll find out, you don't have to read the book, he'll tell you, but Arctic and Antarctic, that comes from Latin and it relates to bear and the Big Dipper. And where he was, you don't get to see the Big Dipper. All right, here we are, years ahead, when I'm already caught up in role models and he's caught up in his investigations. And I'm teaching at the adult ed a class in memoir and personal history. And it's the usual thing, people writing about their first trip to Goleta. And their discovery of the hot dogs at Costco. This dude gets a notion about a sunken continent. And he decides, and he starts focusing on this decision. He's going to get down there and he's going to establish proof that what we think of now as New Zealand was next connected to Goleta, Antarctica. But look, in order to get there, you have to pass some physical tests. And he doesn't look it now and he's overcome it, but there was a little bit of a problem with asthma. They're not going to let him go to Antarctica with all that snow and that weather. So what does he do? He gets on the stationary bike and works his way into shape. And he gets there. And as I mentioned in the blurb, I was only too happy to provide, he invents a kind of a literary genre. It's called the geo-thriller. He's better than Captain Kirk. He's going to a place that no sane person would ever want to go to. And he's got a group of people, and they keep doing things like falling in crevasses, and he's got to take care of them. He's got to make sure, he's got to keep them straight. He's got to focus on the job. And he does. And I began reading when I saw him, I'm just aware of a guy sitting in the back row, and there's this amazing presence, and you look at him and you think, yeah, this dude has got something. There's a kind of a stature. And now he brings up something and he starts to read. And I'm thinking about it. Wait a minute. This could only be Bruce. And after a couple of sessions of reading, he brings a couple of rocks that he passes out to class. We hold the rock and say, "You're holding 100-million-year-old rock in your..." And, I mean, he's been to places where people daren't go. You know, if Shackelford had had an iPhone and a GPS, he wouldn't have messed up. Bruce didn't mess up. He didn't have an iPhone. He didn't have GPS. He had something stronger, and you're going to find all about it in this book. So, meet Bruce Luyendyk.
Thanks, Shelley. Words of wisdom every minute from Shelley. So, I'd like to start these kind of gatherings by asking a question. I think there are 3 people here that have been to Antarctica. Raise your hand if you've been to Antarctica. 1, 2. 2, close. 2 out of 3. Did I miss anybody? No.
Counting you.
Oh yeah, me. Who's been to Everest? 1. Okay. So there's a lot around us. So, what's this about? Okay, first of all, Mighty Badland, a perilous expedition to Antarctica reveals clues in the eighth continent. So if you read this, you'll say, we're browsing through here and you read this, you think, okay, it's scientists. Yeah, they went to Antarctica, they did a bunch of geology, they found some stuff, and then there's a book about it. Okay. So, and who went there? Well, it was me and 5 other people, all from UC Santa Barbara, except for 2 of them were mountaineers, one from Santa Barbara, Steve Tucker, and another one from Scotland, Alistair Kane. So there's 2 mountaineers, and then 4 of us from UCSB, myself, Dave Kimbrough, a new PhD, Steve Richard, a new PhD, and Christine Smith, a woman dynamo, who was my graduate student. And as you'll find out if you read your book, we were out there and experiencing what's called aloneness, how to be alone, really, really alone. So I'm going to read a few things from the book, but not very long, and I'll answer questions. So they'll start off with, I think something I heard many different times, but was best said by Amanda Montell. Montell's are here. One of her sessions about when you do your elevator pitch for a book. What's the book about? That's sentence 1. And sentence 2 is, what's the book really about? And that's sentence 2. And that's your elevator pitch. So my elevator pitch was actually written by David Bowie, musician. And I'm going to read it to you. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting. David Bowie, musician, artist. So that's what the book is about. Everybody in this room has that kind of statement in their life. Okay? Go a little bit out of your depth. And this was mine. This was my experience. So I'm going to read you just a little bit here. I know I've been to these events. I don't want them to get too overwhelming. So the first chapter starts right when we're flying into Antarctica from Christchurch, New Zealand. We're in a military transport, C-130, New Zealand Air Force, and we're on an 8-hour trip from Christchurch to McMurdo. It's called, chapter 1 is called Point of No Return. Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdo Station, November 21st, 1989. Places exist on Earth where no human has gone. Many are unknown or invisible and inaccessible, like the floor of the ocean. Places of unspeakable beauty, frightening to our imagination. They draw us to them as if by an extra pull of gravity. They mesmerize. Few of us get the privilege to visit. The opportunity to explore such places rarely presents itself. To go to them is hard work. At these places, sudden menace can confront and test you. These places change your life forever. You never really leave them. The last place on Earth is Antarctica. I had nurtured a dream of going, decided to take my chances, and now I was on my way, charging south, flying on a Hercules to the bottom of the world and the ice. I want to see Antarctica from the cockpit, I shouted to Tucker. Steve Tucker, my friend and one of the mountaineers who sat next to me. We must be close now. My message to Tucker had to penetrate through the yellow foam earplugs we wore to suppress the din. I timed my visit to the flight deck so I could see Antarctica for the first time. I stepped between the knees of other passengers who sat alongside and across from us and turned each foot sideways to slip my oversized white rubber bunny boots between legs. With each step, knees bumped knees. I made my way forward. At the entrance to the flight deck, I met the legs of a crewman above me. Hello, can I come up? He waved, okay. Our aircraft approached Antarctica from over the Southern Ocean. I climbed up a few steps. A brilliant sky met me. After the murky cargo hold, my eyes needed time to adjust to the blinding brilliance, and my ears to the quiet of the flight deck. The aircraft floated in the sky. Excitement caught my breath. The pilot sat at the front of the cockpit, the engineer behind and between them in a jump seat. The navigator sat at an instrument panel to the right rear. Flight instruments covered ceiling and wall space. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the cockpit, yielding wide, startling views. Immediately, I sensed a moment of inspiration ahead. The pilot dropped our altitude, then flew the Hercules over the coastline. An inconceivable expanse of white stretched ahead and beneath us. Ice reached beyond the horizon. Pure snow below a vivid blue sky. Glaciers spread out like rivers and tributaries. Steep, pointed, dark, majestic peaks jutted up from the blanket of snow and ice. I imagined myself as the first person to discover this amazing scene. I became still lost in that thought. In the distance, the ice dominated. The immense Antarctic ice sheet buried the highest peaks, ignored their existence, made them disappear. I visualized the continent without ice. Ice wasn't always here. It started to grow and then bury the landscape 30 million years ago. Soon I would step foot on the landscape below as a geologist and explorer, finding answers to fundamental questions about the breakup of continents. A thrill came over me, mixed with the wisp of dread. The scene before me looked alien, not of Earth. So overpowering was this vast, vacant expanse, a white ocean of ice with scattered islands of rock. This moment so special, this sight of beauty beyond explanation, its impact on me profound and not expected. I knew my Antarctic adventure would not be topped in my life. I knew I'd carried with me forever. A warmth flowed into me with that realization. I'm going to jump ahead to my first day in McMurdo Station. It's actually at midnight. Of course, the sun is up because the sun doesn't go down in the summertime. And I'm wandering around the dirt streets, and I notice at the end of the street is a small chapel, scaled down version of a New England chapel, complete with a steeple. And it's on a cliff overseeing the wide expanse of the McMurdo Sound, covered with sea ice. And behind it are the Transantarctic Mountains. So I'm looking out the window, and I've taken a cup of coffee that was brewing there, and I'm thinking and admiring. At the far western edge of the sea ice rose the carved, faceted peaks of the Royal Society Range. They glowed white. Shadows of the peaks lay over wide glaciers that cut through them on their route to the Sound. I knew these mountains stood 13,000 feet above the sea. I could make out horizontal layers in the higher peaks. I realized those layers must have formed under the sea and uplifted to form the foundation of these mountains. When did that happen? what was that cause? I imagine what it would be like to stand on those mountaintops, to view the infinity of ice beyond them, the excitement of that, the aloneness. The longer I stared at the range, the more my imagination worked. I saw the peaks as members of a pride of white lions. They crouched at rest. They faced me, sphinx-like. They guarded the colossus of the interior. They dared me to enter. Soon, we'd find ourselves in the wilderness, in conditions much harsher than here. I'd have to be ready. Are you up for this? That's what the NSF official asked me in an exciting phone call when he told me our project was approved. It's not like you'll be working in the Transantarctics or the dry valleys near McMurdo, he said. You'll be way out there, no rescue by helicopters, too far. You're on your own. He waited a few seconds for that message to set in. Lee Birdland has a nickname. You've heard it, right? Mighty Badland. So, what's a reflection on this experience and about this book? What did it teach me? There's a bunch of questions like, why did it take me 30 years to decide to write it, and how long did it take me to write it? But what was the reflecting on the impact on me when I look back on this and the story I've told? It taught me a few things about myself, like my resilience, and my team, their resilience. It taught me about the disbelief that you can experience in a place so alien as the bottom of the world. It taught me about aloneness. This is a concept that we don't experience in our everyday lives very frequently, but being truly, truly alone. There's nobody for hundreds of miles. We were 800 miles out. We were alone, by our 6 of us alone. So, with all that, I want to thank you for listening. I have some cards that you can grab if you want with my website on it and sign up for my newsletter when I'm going to send it out irregularly. I think the last one was 2 years ago. But I have a bunch of questions, and I will take questions from the gathering, and I'll prompt you if you don't have any questions. I have questions to ask myself. So, I'm taking questions.
Tell us a story that wasn't in the book, that you wanted to include in the book, but that got edited out.
I forgot.
Tell everybody who that
Don't make me put you on the spot.
What's that?
Don't make me put you on the spot.
I'll tell you one thing about, I read this book last night, part of it, and I said, this part missing in the book. And then I said, is this a misprint? No, it read perfectly. Then I realized in one of the edits, I edited it out. I got rid of it. It was one of my favorite sections. So one of the things you learn when you like Shelley will teach you is called kill your darlings. When you've written stuff that you think is so terrific, and then the editor says, "What's this?" You get rid of it.
What was that section?
It goes in the
It was
newsletter.
details about Shackleton. But you give me a hint about what I deleted that I don't remember.
I don't remember.
You're the clever one.
All right, that's a good one. First curveball from my own son. He's an OAE, by the way, Old Antarctic Explorer. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
You got your third Antarctica veteran there. James just walked in after you counted the first two.
Oh, there's another Antarctic explorer. Oh, James.
Yeah.
No.
My dad says hi.
Great, that's great. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just for a couple minutes, a couple questions. I think they're pretty good because I've been on radio interviews now. I've done several, and this is really interesting because what the interviews want from you before you sit and you have to talk to them about an hour. They want questions and answers. List of questions with answers. So I went through this exercise about 5 times. Well, why did you write it, and why did you wait so long? Because this takes place in 1989-90. So why did you write it? Well, because I just was thinking about Antarctica almost every day I was, several times a day, my entire life. And I went there 9 times total. So it's just something that I was kept on doing. And I thought I had a story, but I didn't know exactly what it was. So that was that's the 30-year part. It took me 30 years to figure out exactly what these experiences meant to me, so I could digest it and then put it on paper, which took 10 years to do that part. What's the hardest part about writing a book? Well, this is a memoir, so the hardest part is not hiding anything, not BSing, telling the truth, exposing yourself. There's things in this book that are, it's not for children. But that's the hardest part is opening up. Don't hold back. Don't hide anything. A really good book, if you want to see how this is done by an expert, is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. She shows you how that's done. What's it like to live in a tent? In Antarctica, we were living in tents. When I first heard this idea that we were going to live in tents in Antarctica, I was thinking they're talking about somebody else. We're going somewhere else, right? not me. So, for weeks, 6 of us were 2 people to a tent, and you're always cold. You never take your clothes off. I mean, you strip down, of course, but you're never naked. You don't sit in a chair. You're sleeping on the snow. Storms, if there's a storm out, you're not going out in a storm. The longest I was in a storm was for 10 days. In this tent, it's 8 by 8, me and Dave and me. Just 10 days and do things like sleep, eat, read, write, rewrite, rewrite, things like that. Cooking inside with this little tiny 1 burner stove that heats the tent up to maybe 50 degrees. Was it cold there? Where we were was near the ocean, so we had moderating influences, and so there would only be like about 20 Fahrenheit would be a good day. If the wind's blowing, then you got wind chill, and it's a whole nother ball game. Anybody who's been in the snow when wind's blowing. And if it's over freezing, then it's slushy and you're getting wet, and that's miserable. So you want to be right around 20 degrees Fahrenheit with the layered clothes and no wind. And as far as the weather, it was overcast or stormy maybe 2/3 of the time. So maybe 1/3 of the time we can get out and do some work, or another way of looking at it is about 1/3 of the time you could get rescued. The rest of the time you're not.
This is summer?
This is summer.
Okay.
Yes. So it's like winter in Minnesota, Antarctica summer.
So Bruce, I have to ask the Alvin question, and that's the question that you've been asked many times. You're diving in Alvin, you're down 10,000 feet. What do you do when,
The urge?
you gotta go?
Yeah.
So you're in the tent for 10 days in a blizzard. So I'm asking you the Alvin question.
Okay, right.
How do you deal with that?
In the Alvin, of course, you've got 10 hours to hold it. But so, what you have, and every tent has got this, is a tunnel to get out, and right by the tunnel, you start what's called a pee hole, and you've got a polyethylene bottle with skull and crossbones on it, and you fill it up, and then you pour it down the pee hole that gets bigger and bigger over time. So for number 2, you go out behind a snow block wall or a tent if you're lucky to have a tent. The first year we did not have a tent, so we had to, and there's a good section of the chapter about this whole, how this works in a blizzard. And so you do that outside in the environment, and then it's collected and it's put into 5-gallon buckets, and it's taken back to McMurdo at the end.
That was a longer answer. Well done.
Bruce, was there ever a time when somebody in, among the six of you that basically where they felt like they wanted to come back? I mean, you're 800 miles from nowhere. And was there ever a time when you basically thought, well, maybe we've done enough, we should just go back?
Was there anybody who thought that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like me. No, the main thing that I've found from the people I was with, like Christine and Steve, was more work. I gotta stay out here longer to do more work. That's what they were thinking. Matter of fact, I just told the story to Susan last night about Steve. There's a blizzard outside, and we were pinned down, of course. And he wanted to go to work, so he talked Christine into going out, agreeing to that, and then they talked a mountaineer into taking them out to go to work, and they were gone for about an hour before they decided it's really a blizzard out there, and it's cold. So, yeah, I think everybody was really dedicated. We knew there was a lot at stake. It costs a lot of money to do something like this. Not many people get this kind of chance to do this. Privilege, it's a privilege to do this. And so we weren't wasting time, and we were on the game. Yeah. So another question from,
What do you think your most exciting discovery was?
I didn't hear you, Jim.
What do you think your most exciting discovery was scientifically?
What was our most exciting discovery?
Really,
Okay, I should point out that this is a memoir, it's a journey, but there's a big section at the back which is scientific findings, which is fully referenced. So we had 20 or 30 papers come out of these expeditions. So the most exciting thing we discovered, we figured out, was that New Zealand once was nestled up against this part of marine birdland in the South Pacific, but New Zealand sits on top of these plateaus that are continental material. So New Zealand just is the part of the continent poking up above water. So if you take New Zealand and these other plateaus that are sitting around next to it, about the size of India if you add them all up, you can move them right back to the coast of Antarctica, and they're part of Gondwana. So the most exciting thing was that kind of figuring out that this continent has been underwater for 100 million years. And it was just kind of the germ of an idea. And of course, I didn't follow up on that beyond that step. The New Zealand geologists really dug into this and really dissected this, because it means a lot to that country that they've got this giant continent they're sitting on. See, geologists don't think of continents as where the sea level is, because sea level goes up and down. It's about the rock. It's continental rock. Sea level goes up and down, floods the continent's exposed, etc. So I think that was the most exciting thing we found. Yeah.
Wow.
I think I got from your reading why you went the first time. Like, it was, stunning and magical and an experience you couldn't really get any other way. Why did you go back 9 times?
Yeah. There's certain things that you do in your life that haunt you, kind of. Keep on pulling you at you. You can think of all different things, different examples of it. But just that, I got to do this. I have to continue to do this because this makes me feel a certain way. And I like that feeling. So that's why.
And was the aloneness a draw or something to overcome?
Aloneness
or both?
was a challenge for me.
Yeah.
It was a real challenge because I wasn't prepared for that in my head. The extent of it. And that took me a while to deal with that. After the first expedition, dealing with the aloneness, accepting it, before I decided to go back. That was the biggest burden I had. I mean, we have no contact. There's no emails. There's no sat phones. The radio, we had a radio to communicate with McMurdo, but it was only to report your weather and get ready for a flight which would never come. So it was really, you had no contact with our family or colleagues or anything like that for weeks. So you're not only physically alone, there's no information coming in. There's a chapter in this book about mail that talks about what that means and how important that is, and the screw ups that happened that we didn't get it. So.
How long was your average trip?
How long was my average trip? Well, this one, so door to door, like Santa Barbara to Santa Barbara, about 3 months. But I'm telling you, one day snow camping is something you don't forget. Hey, Craig.
Yeah, so in writing a memoir, there was probably some self-discovery that you found that you didn't expect before you started writing it. Can you tell us, or what one of those self-discoveries that you?
Yeah, the two things. One was I didn't realize how resilient I was, and when I wrote down, look at all those things I did, I said, I don't quit. The other thing was dealing with being alone. That was a big hurdle that I didn't know I had, because it's hard to be alone where we are.
When you say you were alone, I thought you were with a group of 5 other people or 6 other people.
Yeah, the 6 of us. Okay, so the 6 of us were alone.
So you were isolated.
We were isolated, and I was accountable for everybody. So that's different. And Chris and Steve and Dave, all they cared about was, can I go out and work? I wanted to make sure that we did the right work and everybody was safe and et cetera. And we weren't wasting money and dot. You've been there.
Bruce, your mountain, did you just look around and go, oh, I like that one? Or was it because you were camped near that? Or, or was it a sign?
I'm going to wrap this up with this last question. How do you get a mountain named after you? You've treated a graduate student really, really well, and you're grateful. And so Christine and another graduate student of mine nominated me. These are things I didn't even realize. We had been at this mountain that had a name. It was 1070, a number, and we had this horrific storm over Christmas, and which is my first introduction to what a real Antarctic blizzard is, in a tent. And so I had this memory of this mountain, but it had 1070, didn't have a name on it. So Chris and my other student, Chris Mail, nominated me to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names. There's actually a bureaucracy for this. And so then they went to the NSF, and then they went to the Antarctic Board on Geographic Names. And then from there, it goes to all sorts of government agencies, like the USGS, who tracks names, and Homeland Security, the CIA, to make sure that you're not a terrorist. I'm labeling a mountain. And after a couple of years, and I didn't actually know what was going on, she just popped it on me, and it's there now. It can be any land. Give me my son's mountain someday, or so that's how that happened. So anyway, I am ready to sign books, and I've got cards here for you to sign up. Go to my website and sign up for my irregular posts and emails and newsletters and stuff like that. And I really appreciate you guys showing up. I recognize everybody here. I've known for a long, long time. I appreciate it. Really. Thanks so much.